More competitions ban Russian athletes from play. Wimbledon organizers say sanctions are necessary, but is it fair when sports and politics mix? I'm Andrea Sankey, and this is the Newsmakers. Daniil Medvedev is the second best tennis player in the world right now and was one of the favorites to win this year's Wimbledon tournament. But now he and every other Russian and Belarusian tennis player will be kept off that grass court. The All England Lawn Tennis Club, the body that runs the tournament, has banned the athletes over Russia's assault on Ukraine. And this was the reason they gave.
Given the profile of the championships in the United Kingdom and around the world, it is our responsibility to play our part in the widespread efforts of government, industry, sporting, and creative institutions to limit Russia's global influence through the strongest means possible.
Wimbledon is the first Grand Slam tournament to sanction Russia. The decision has divided fans, players, and pundits. Russian tennis world number 8, Andrei Rublev, who opposes the war, called the ban illogical and discriminatory. And Novak Djokovic, arguably one of the greatest tennis players in history, described it as crazy.
I cannot support the decision of Wimbledon. I think it's crazy. Players, tennis players, athletes, they have nothing to do with it.
And it's not just some of the players who've come out against the ban. The ATP, in charge of men's professional tennis, also condemned the decision. But there are those who strongly support the move, including the now-retired Ukrainian star, Alexander Dolgopolov, who signed up to fight Russian forces in Kiev. Taking to Twitter after Wimbledon made the announcement, he wrote,
"Any sport or business or really anything should take the same stance. Until Russian people stand up and stop their bloody leader and all these war crimes and crimes against humanity. Wimbledon and UK showing leadership to stop all this madness."
Well, let's speak to another athlete now whose display of a no war in Ukraine sign at the Beijing Winter Olympics made global headlines. Vladyslav Heraskevych is a two-time Olympian skeleton racer joining us now from Kiev. Thanks so much for being with us. You know, for some, the argument is really just so clear that you don't mix sports with politics. Athletes are competitors in sports where politics, they play no part, they have no place. So why, as an athlete, do you feel that's not true, that you should seize opportunities to make statements in sports when it matters?
Of course, even when you say sports is out of politics, it sounds not clear because and not true, because what we see on the Korea Olympic Games, it's clearly political when we try to connect Korea and other things what IOC do and other sports do. So athletes, anyway, it's representatives of their countries, and it's in some way it's faces of the countries. So of course it's politics, and we can say it's out of politics, but it's in.
So
what we see also.
So yeah. It wasn't a hard decision then for you to hold up that sign in front of the world when people weren't expecting it.
It was hard, and it was hard to understand that you need to do it, and it's absolutely crazy. Like in 21st century, do these statements for the world because war is coming, and it's really sad that it's not help and it's not stop the war. And what we have now, it's absolutely crazy. We have war in the middle of Europe, in my native country, and people are dying, kids are being raped, women are raped, and it's absolutely crazy. And saddest thing, like for me as an athlete, it's people with I competing with Russian athlete, and these athletes now they do the propaganda of war in Russia. We saw it in Luzhniki and other methods what they use, and it's absolutely crazy.
Okay, so do you think enough has been done against Russia and Belarus for the world of sports to say, okay, we've done enough, we're doing the right thing? Or is this just a start?
It's just a start anyway, not enough, because now all the suspension are not. We don't have like a timeline of suspension. So like 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. We don't even know it. And in my opinion, we should do parallel with doping scandals. And of course, like if athlete supports war, he shouldn't be in sports at all in the future. So athletes should be banned for life, because at all main mission of sports is to bring peace and unity to the world. But when athletes support war, he like what he brings to the world? He bring war and death. So of course, these athletes should be banned for life. Athletes who stay quiet, they should get less sanctions. So maybe like 4 years or a little bit more. And athletes who support Ukraine, who support peace, it's not a lot members, but still some athletes support in Russia support Ukraine. So they should get opportunity to compete for another country. So they should go and have this opportunity.
So they should have an opportunity compete under a neutral flag. But let me ask you this.
No,
or in other countries.
Yeah, by naturalized, but in a more easiest procedure. So they should get this opportunity because they support peace, and they like they're real athletes, and they do main mission of sports at all. So of course, these athletes should get some opportunities to compete and compete in world sports.
Let me ask you this then. I have to put this to you because you believe sports and politics are naturally intertwined. Should China's Winter Olympics that you competed at, should they have been canceled then for the alleged human rights abuses there?
Like it's a hard question, and of course, all what we have, like not peaceful. It should be. We should do something with that. So of course, athletes should bring peace, and in my mission now, as an athlete and as a Ukrainian, to bring peace in my country, and it's what I fight for. And of course, if like China Games was really hard, and maybe, but like I can say my opinion on it. I'm not like political, or I'm not member of IOC. Yeah, I'm not like head of IOC, so it's not my choice. So I can say my opinion, and you can choose. You want to hear it, or you doesn't want to hear it.
Okay, Vladyslav Heraskevych, thank you so much for being with us on the Newsmakers. So let's broaden out the discussion now and bring in 3 new panelists. Joining me is Ukrainian professional tennis player Illya Marchenko. Ellis Cashmore joins us from Birmingham, UK. He's an honorary professor of sociology at Aston University. And from London, we have Channel 4 News sports correspondent Jarrett-Bryan. He's also the founder of the cultural platform Blackademic. Thanks all so much for being with us. Ellis, I'll start with you. Why is this kind of ban a bad idea, which you think could actually backfire?
Well, a couple of reasons. It doesn't serve any useful purpose. I'm sure it isn't going to make a scrap of difference to the conflict in Ukraine. It penalizes 144 million Russians. We have no idea what they're thinking or feeling about the conflict, but we know one thing for sure, that they're not getting any involvement in sport, not even allowed to watch sport on TV at the moment. And history tells us that if you ban or boycott a country, as a great many parts of the world did South Africa from the mid-1970s until the early 1990s, with a view to hastening the demolition of apartheid, that if you do something like that, then it feels good from the rest of the world's point of view, as if they're doing something. But did it hasten the end of apartheid? There's no evidence to suggest it made a scrap of difference.
Are you sure about that? Because many would argue that that unique pressure that was placed on the apartheid South African government and how isolated it made South Africans feel, that it was a real game changer in the global campaign to bring apartheid down.
As I say, it made people feel pretty good about it. And on reflection, I joined the chorus at the time saying that we've helped bring about the end of apartheid. But in the cold light of day, when you look at the evidence, it really actually didn't do anything at all. So the beneficiaries were the people who were imposing the
Okay.
ban.
Because that is really the one prime example that's held up as this is when it works. This is when sports and politics do mix, and you can make a difference by putting pressure on governments via this channel. Jordan, Jarrett-Bryan, I mean, do you agree or disagree? Can we use apartheid South Africa as an example? Would it apply to Russia?
I tend to agree with the fellow panelists that I think there was a warm and fuzzy feeling about maybe, this will change things. But I think, was there any real tangible evidence that it stopped apartheid? I'm not convinced either. I think what's significant, first of all, here is that for those people that say, sports and politics can and should never mix, well, this just kind of blows that out of the park, because I think this is an example of where the power of sport actually can have some influence. Will it fix or solve a problem? That's to be decided, but we'll see how it plays out. But it can have an impact. What I find interesting is here in England, especially amongst the media, there's so much anger and backlash that I'm seeing towards what Wimbledon are doing here in banning Belarusian and Russian athletes from competing at Wimbledon this year. But if you decide as a country that what's happening in another country is abhorrent and is wrong, and you want to send a message that we want to impose sanctions on those attributing those atrocities, you have to be seen at least to be going to the nth degree. And I think Wimbledon and tennis can't isolate itself in that sense from other sports that have said we're not going to take any Russian teams or athletes. So I find it weird that people have a problem with this, because it makes sense in terms of being consistent with the rest of sports policy in this country, anyway, here in the UK, and what everyone else has done. Will it have a final impact in changing what's happening in Russia and Ukraine? I'm not so sure.
Okay, let me ask Ilya, as a Ukrainian, seeing Russian athletes banned from these competitions, do you think it'll make a difference? Does it have an effect on Russia's stance in this conflict?
Well, at least we hope so, because I'm biased because I'm Ukrainian, obviously, and I'm part of this conflict. And so far, there were no clear messages from Russian players that they are against this war, this conflict. So, yeah, and I think this war is bigger than any tennis player or even tennis tournament. So it's about being consistent and about sending the Russian people a message that if they continue to support actions like this, if they continue like this, that they are not going to be part of Western society.
Okay, but I mean, that kind of it paints all Russians with one brush, as we say. Because, Russian tennis player that we quoted, Andrei Rublev, he's spoken out against the war. He actually offered to donate any money he might make in tournaments to Ukraine, as well as sign an anti-war pledge. He wrote, "No war, please," on that camera during broadcast. Yet he's caught up in this ban as well. So then people end up saying, well, you know what? That gives Putin a chance to rally Russian nationalism, to say, see, they are against us. It doesn't matter who we are. The world is against every Russian unfairly. And that's another argument people make, that this could backfire. You could actually make all Russians dislike Ukraine.
First of all, I would like to say about this no war message, because from the mouth of a Russian, it can mean like very different things. Maybe it means that Ukraine should give up, and then the war gonna finish. There is a possibility of that as well, and that's why we Ukrainian tennis players, in particular, and Ukrainian people, we don't see this no war thing as a condemning Russian crimes.
Okay, Jordan, go ahead.
Yeah, can I just also say, I take your point there where you said this could backfire in terms of, casting all Russians with the same brush. But in sport and in tennis in particular, you don't represent yourself. You represent a country. So I almost, and this is going to sound incredibly harsh and unfair, but I don't think it really matters if you are Russian and you're pro or against the war. The fact that you are Russian, unfortunately, means that if the Western world and sporting tournaments and competitions decide that we are anti this war and are sending a message and sanctioning all Russians, whether you're a businessman or woman, an athlete, we're sorry, but that is the message that's got to be colored through. So I think it's almost irrelevant if the athlete is pro or against. You're Russian, and we are saying, as a competition, as a sport, we are not allowing people from that particular country to compete here until things end. And I think that is an incredibly unfair stance for those Russians who are against the war. But you can't. Unfortunately, you're Russian, and if the message is to be consistent, you have to apply it to all Russians.
Right. But Jordan, I mean, at the same time, you're saying this is still a very slippery slope, and you go down this road, you can open up a big can of worms. So how so?
Well, yeah, because I mean, it's all well and good taking the moral stance that, okay, we're not going to allow people from a particular country to compete at our competition, whether it's football, tennis, whatever it may be. But here in the UK, and football is a sport that's the major sport here, there are people that have committed crimes and are still taking part in sport. So I think tennis and Wimbledon have to be very, very careful. And indeed, sport has to be very, very careful about going down the moral argument too much, because there'll always be an example of someone that's done something really, really bad, maybe not inflict a war, but something really, really bad, where someone could say, well, hang on a minute, how comes that person is allowed to still compete at that particular competition?
Okay, and when we look at geopolitics, I mean, Ellis, the question is, where does it end then? The U.S. was never banned from international competition when it illegally invaded Iraq. Israeli athletes haven't been banned, the occupation of Palestine. And as we said before, China was able to host the Olympics in spite of allegations of serious human rights abuses.
And that's because up to recently, sport did try to keep politics to its minimum. This was always a great myth that sport and politics don't mix, whereas historically they've mixed very well. But over the past 3 or 4, maybe 5 years, Black Lives Matter has changed everything. This has been the real game changer in the world of sport. And so many sports now have felt that they must take a moral position on this, and this has implicated them in political stances. We now see a great many sports who have aligned themselves with Black Lives Matter and said that we will make this conspicuous, obvious that we do nail our colours to the mast. And this has led to Wimbledon. I mean, the Wimbledon ban would not have happened 5 years ago. I mean, Wimbledon would have just said, politics is no business of ours. We have no right. The athletes, contrary to what some people think, are not representing their countries. Medvedev, for example, doesn't even live in Russia. I think he lives in Monaco. We don't know what he thinks or feels, but we're banning him just the same. Now, Jordan says that he's happy, sorry, not happy, but satisfied that this serves a purpose. He declares himself that it's grossly unfair. I'm uncomfortable with that. This is sport. Okay, I know politics are in sport, but is it necessary to ban every single Russian athlete as individuals just because of an accident of birth? They happen to have been born in the wrong place at the wrong time?
So Ellis, can I ask you, I hear what you're saying. What's the alternative? Let's say Medvedev arrives at Wimbledon and wins Wimbledon. The British government can't be seen for royalty.
So what? He wins it on merit. He wins Wimbledon on merit. I don't imagine. I was talking to someone the other day, if you'll excuse me, Jordan.
Sure,
sorry,
sure.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but I know we're going to come back to you. But someone said, Putin will be triumphant. He'll be celebrating if Medvedev wins Wimbledon. If, theoretically, he did manage to win Wimbledon. Putin couldn't care less. He's got bigger fish to fry. There are much more urgent issues in his in-tray than whether a Russian wins at Wimbledon. And so I think it's inconsequential. That's my point, to punishing people who are innocent. Let's face it, they are innocent. They just happen to be born in Russia. But I think the longer-term consequences of this are quite incredible, because I don't see any way that Russia will be allowed to compete in any kind of international sports tournament, whether it's the World Cup or the Olympics or any other international tournaments, perhaps for the next couple of decades. I think Russia will be isolated certainly for the rest of my life. It will never be allowed to compete in sport again.
It's amazing here because there's almost a contradiction in this entire discussion, even when both sides make their points, because you're not supposed to mix sports with politics, but we have to be honest that protesting athletes have made some of the most powerful political statements in history. So there is undeniably this crossover. Jesse Owens, Colin Kaepernick. You know, we just spoke to we just spoke to the Ukrainian athlete that made global headlines because he made a point of protesting.
Because sport is such a fantastic theater. If you want to make a political point, make it in sport because the world will take notice. Smith and Carlos knew this at the Mexico Olympics, and the repercussions of their statement are being felt even today.
But this is why I think, to your point about Putin having bigger fish to fry, I partially agree, but I think Putin understands the value of sporting success more than many, many world leaders. Yes, he may have bigger fish to fry, but let's not underestimate the power of having athletes and a nation that dominates in top-class sports like a tennis. I think
disagreeing
Putin,
with you on that point.
I'm not saying that Putin's going to be at home thinking I'm the greatest could be one tennis, but I think that to dismiss it completely is naive. And secondly, I think the British government can't be seen to be talking tough talk about what's happening in Ukraine with one side of their mouth, and in the other, one of their flagship and most famous sporting competitions be seen to be handing a trophy and money via royalty.
Hang on. Handing a trophy. I mean, the guy would start the same as any other competitor at Wimbledon. I mean, he's number 2 rated in the world, so he would be favoured to reach at least the semi-final.
I'll tell you what. Let me interrupt you two, because I really do want to get Ilya's take on the exchange that he's been listening to as a competing athlete that's very much in this game right now. Go ahead.
Well, the thing is, I watched Russian TV many, many times, and I just wanted to quote a very recent speech from Vice Premier Chernyshchenko to Olympians. He said, this is quote, "Our country is facing a very difficult situation, but you were on the front line earlier than others." That was exactly his words, and I think Russians actually are to blame why politics right now and sport are so integrated to each other. And they reacted to Wimbledon ban. Peskov reacted within hours to Wimbledon ban. So I don't think, even if in some countries sport is somewhat out of politics, it's definitely not the case in Russia, and they use it very, very strong for their concert in support of annexation of Crimea and the war which we have today. They brought their Olympians to the stadium, so they show it, they use it like every single day. That's why I think the sport is big part, and they have 14 former athletes in their Gosduma, so it's very big part of politics in Russia, for sure.
So, Ilya, and you think taking away their platform by banning them from major competitions like Wimbledon does have an effect?
Yeah.
It cuts their voices out.
Well, that's the point. I mean, now you see Rublev is talking about sending money. Like these cases are ruining their propaganda. I mean, they have tons of fans in Russia, and obviously if your favorite player is saying that he's not agreeing with the action of his government, more and more people start to think if it's right or wrong, because for now most of the Russian population, they are kind of separated from this war, and they don't feel any responsibility, and they feel it like, okay, Putin and the government, it's one thing, it's a separate thing, but still Putin has a huge amount of support within Russia, and they believe that what he's doing is the right thing. So we need to, yeah.
But Ilya, if I may interrupt, let me go back to Andrea's previous point. This could backfire in an altogether grotesque way, because Russians, as you say, will feel increasingly isolated. I'm talking about ordinary sports-loving Russians who are denied the ability to turn on the TV and watch sport, or and know that their fellow Russians are denied access into sport.
But from Ilya's point, I'm realizing it can very much.
Manchester United manager Alex Ferguson. Well, he famously used to cultivate what they call a siege mentality amongst his players. He used to persuade the Manchester United players that the whole world was against them. Even the referees were against them. And this generated within them a ferocity, a sense of purpose and unity, which equipped them very well. Of course, he was a stupendously successful manager. I'm thinking something like this might be happening in Russia at the moment.
So what's the alternative?
It is for sure.
The West are denying us, they're expelling us from the world of sport.
Okay.
And this makes them harden their resolve even more.
Gentlemen, I'm really going to have to interrupt you at this point. So unfortunately, we're completely out of time for this edition of The Newsmakers, but it's fascinating that you have both made the points that it does work both ways. You can silence some, but other voices will come out, and it can feed both ends of the debate. So I'd like to thank all three of you really so much for being with us, and our viewers as well for tuning in. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.